Chapter 14 A Wound That Festers. Dream wanted his arrival to be a surprise. Since they had arrived in the city nearly 2 hours before midnight, the Golden Guardian chose to stay at an inn with his companions. The rabbit monster who owned the inn got up to check who rang the bell at the front desk. Her tired expression turned to surprise as she saw the beloved skeleton guardian standing there with several of the royal guards. Dream put a finger to his mouth. "Sorry to disturb you so late. Please, our arrival should be a secret." The owner had them set up in several rooms, Dream sharing one with his most trusted companion, Undying. Even though they only had the one set of clothes on their backs, Dream was elated to sleep in a real bed. Without even crawling into the sheets, he threw himself on the mattress, shoving his face into the fluff of the pillow. He was snoring before Undying even had her breastplate off or her hair down. A few minutes later, the lights were off and Undying laid in her own bed. Then, an hour past midnight, Dream flew awake with a yelp. A horrible pain radiated from his left knee. It stung all the way into his hip as he reacted to grab it, breathing through his teeth. "What the hell?" Dream heaved. "What's wrong?" Undying groaned, stirring awake, starting to sit up. I think Nightmare might have hurt himself." Dream huffed as he tried to relax. Taking a deep breath, he laid back down, pushing the pain from his mind. "What the hell is he doing up so late?" Undying grumbled, laying back down. "I don't know." Dream felt too tired to dwell on it, ready to fall back asleep. However, the Golden Guardian didn't find rest. His jaw started aching so suddenly that he gently clicked his teeth and rubbed it with his hand. Half out of it, he wondered if he might be getting a cavity. But that couldn't be it. The pain came from both sides of his mouth and even in his neck. It caused him such disturbance that he sat up, rubbing his sockets. Dream coughed softly, not wanting to wake Undying. It was the type of pain that made him uncertain if it was coming from him or his brother. Tiredly, Dream closed his eyes as he continued to sit up, letting the pain be as it was. Crack! Dream screamed, his spine straightening as pain shot through every bone. Warm blood soaked the fabric of his left leg where the bone suddenly broke open. Undying rolled out of bed, summoning a spear into her hand before she knew what was happening. "Dream?" She saw the crimson soaking through his trousers. Instantly, Dream knew that the pain hadn't been his own. "Nightmare!" he cried out as Undying rushed to roll up his pant leg. Though she summoned her own magic to start healing, the bone began mending on its own. "What the hell is going on?" she said. "It must be Nightmare! Something is happening!" Dream gasped. Turning her gaze to the window, Undying moved to throw the curtains away. The view overlooked the massive city. In the far distance, the fishwoman squinted her eyes to focus her sight. At the top of the falls, she could make out the tiny glowing lights of a dozen torches. "I think you're right. Something's going on in the grove." Even with the pain still in his bones, Dream stumbled to his feet, holding onto the side of the bed. "We have to go there now!" "Right. Damn it, where is the night watch guards?" she said, as her loose hair moved around her head. There was no time to put her armor back on. Bursting out of the room, Undying slammed her fist hard against the doors where the other guards slept. "Everyone awake! We're moving! Now! To the sacred grove! Up, up, soldiers!" Stumbling out of the room, Dream leaned against the doorframe, trying to gather his strength. He took several deep breaths as the guards' doors opened and Undying came to scoop him in her arms. "Grab just your weapons! We're moving now!" In seconds, Dream and his companions were running into the street, Undying flagging down a passing carriage, ordering the driver and passengers to surrender it for the sake of the crown. When the civilians saw the Golden Guardian cradled in her arms, wincing in pain, there was no argument as they allowed the guards to seize the carriage. Soon enough, they were flying down the quiet evening streets. The guard driving the horses maneuvered fast and carefully around other moving vehicles. Undying sat Dream in the seat beside her. As soon as he went to look out the window, Dream threw himself against the back of the seat. Pain stung intensely and at random throughout his ribs and back. Confused, the royal guard looked at Dream, out the window, then back at him as he spoke. This is not normal. He's being tortured." Blood blotted several parts of Dream's shirt, begging his pardon. Undying unlatched the front seam so that she could see the wounds that were forming on his ribs. "Damn it! Whoever these people are, I already fucking hate them!" she said, once again using healing magic to manage the spontaneous injuries. Dream's hands gripped the arm of the seat and Undying's shoulder. Every bump in the road or sudden turn made the pain sting all the more. The skeleton became hyper-aware of every little sting or pressure along the bruising and the cracks forming on his bones. Taking a deep breath, it pained him just to form words. There's something on my back. It's growing on my back. Quivering, Dream leaned forward and Undying held him. Moving his cloak aside, she pulled down the back of his shirt to see whatever it was that was bothering him. What the fuck? What is it? Dream wheezed, clinging to her. I think. He could feel her fingers touch against whatever it was growing beside his shoulder blades, only pulling away when it gave a buzzing sound. I think it's wings! Clutching tighter, the random pains continued as the wings kept growing. Unsure how to help him, Undying looked out the window and towards the falls. Though they were getting closer, it would still be at least 20 minutes before they reached the grove. Coughing, the pressure in Dream's mouth overwhelmed his skull. He couldn't catch his breath. Just as Undying straightened him up, some kind of black mush started leaking from his mouth. What the hell? She said, recoiling in disgust. Dream threw a hand over his mouth, but the slime escaped through the side of his jaws. Though rotten, he knew that taste. It was the dark apples. Stop the carriage! He choked on his words. Damn it! Stop! She called up to the driver. Pulling to the side of the road, the carriage slowed to a stop. Dream shoved the door open, throwing his head out so that he could vomit onto the cobblestone. He'd never thrown up before. As blackness overwhelmed the inside of his skull, all he knew is that he had to expel it. Holding onto him, an arm around his waist, Undying pat his back where the wings started. Get it out, whatever it is, she said. After a solid 2 minutes, the black slime finally stopped pouring out of him. Undying's eyes kept dodging back up to the grove as she turned to another guard. Go on ahead, sound the alarms. Get anyone up there, she said. The guard nodded, going out the opposite door. Though Dream finally caught his breath, he could feel new punches and stings against his hips and ribs. The newly formed wings on his back hummed with anxiety, begging to be spread open. I have to get up there. All right, let's go. Let's get us moving. No, let me out. What? Dream pushed past Undying's grip, dodging the black puddle on the ground and barely keeping to his feet. Dream, what are you doing? Said the captain, confused. But the guardian turned his face upward, locking his eyes with the grove. I'm gonna fly. Fly? Dream! Those wings just came out of nowhere. How do you even know if... But as she spoke, the wings sprung outward, throwing his cloak to the side. Their translucent petals glistened with golden swirls and spots, catching the light of the street lamps. He didn't understand it either, but somehow the wings were a part of him, that he needed them to get to Nightmare right away. With the intensity of a hummingbird, the wings lifted him like a bolt off the ground. Though he aimed to move upward for a moment, he swayed back and forth in the air, yelping. He held his arms out until he understood how to balance his weight, straightening as he flew over the sparkling city below. The higher he flew, the pressure changed quickly, causing little pops in his ears. The air turned cold as it brushed against his bones, but he didn't care. All he could think about was Nightmare and what might be happening to him. Fires were growing in the forest above. Whatever was happening was spreading out of control. As soon as his vision broke the top of the falls, he felt his soul leap into his throat. Carnage. Crimson blood and bodies of dozens of humans littered the sacred grove. Someone was crawling, holding their bleeding gut as they begged for mercy, mercy from a strange creature, black as the void, with limbs spread out like the roots of a tree. Still, he was too far away to stop the creature as it cut off the man's head, ending his life. A blind, intense rage filled Dream's head, his mind flashing back to the first day they were born, the black creature that had chased them through the woods and tried to hurt Nightmare. Throwing his arms back, Dream straightened out his body. He pushed his new wings to move as quickly as possible. Through the air, Dream could hear the creature wail in distorted vocalizations. It rose again, increasing its size as its focus turned on the tree itself. No, stop! Dream cried, but the wind carried his voice away. Something like a black blade appeared on the creature's roots as it swung it towards the sacred tree, slicing through the trunk. Just as Dream's feet met the grass, he felt something in his soul sever, like a nerve that connected him to the earth, and all living souls upon it went numb. Whatever this was, it was trying to kill him, and the entire world. Without a second thought, he summoned his bow, drew an arrow, and fired through the center mass of the creature. Instantly, his ribs exploded in a spray of blood through his open shirt. Dream fell to his knees, gasping, and grabbed the bleeding wound. It felt like an arrow going through his chest. What is... Raising his head, his mind began to connect the dots. As the tree hit the ground with a rumble, nowhere in the massacre had he spotted his brother. As the creature turned, Dream could see the front side of it was a black skeleton. Roots bursting from its right socket, the left still had a familiar violet light, glaring down at him with fearful intensity. Nightmare? Dream cried, knowing his brother's face. The face twisted in so many emotions there wasn't one Dream could discern. Upon his roots, Nightmare hovered away. Don't look at me! Nightmare, wait! I'm sorry! I'm sorry, I didn't know it was you! Tears fell down Dream's eyes as he tried to reach out. No! Nightmare shook his head, clutching the matching wound. No! Hiding his face in his arms, Nightmare spun around as the roots ran him towards the white sea. All at once, Dream realized what he was planning to do, neither of them truly knowing what would happen if he did. Nightmare, no! He screamed. Nightmare threw himself into the endless white, fading quickly and disappearing from sight. Dream froze, horrified. Though his brother had vanished, he was still there, feeling the blood drip between his fingers. The blood. So much of it he was losing at once. Dream felt his sockets grow heavy, legs and arms going cold. He slowly collapsed more and more into the grass. No, I can't. He feared losing consciousness, knowing if he lost too much blood he'd surely perish. But there wasn't any way he could fight it. Fires blazing surrounding the grove, the sacred tree felled, the pain from all the injuries across Dream's body, the guardian breathing slowly as he laid against the earth. He was going to die. He felt it surely in his soul. Nightmare, I failed you, he uttered, before his eyelids faded, darkness taking him. Dream had fallen down. To be fallen down as a monster didn't mean one had passed away, but rather one stood at the very edge of life and death. A quiet woe infected the social life of the city. News of the massacre in the grove spread quickly. The royal guards were still attempting to understand what had happened. Dream remained unconscious since Undying recovered him. No one knew if he was going to pull through or what had happened to Nightmare. The sound of locusts chirping pounded loudly against the humid air. Asgore stood silently in horror as the last human body was recovered from the grove, placed on simple gurneys and covered with white sheets. A few of the bodies were still missing limbs that hadn't been found. Whoever these men were, they had been up to no good. Asgore was sure they were responsible for the murders of the guards along both incline paths whose dust gathered in their empty armor. A foul smell hung on the air, blood coating the grass, attracting flies and other vermin to its scent. Smoke still rose from where the fires had been put out. Ash flaked where the blood hadn't touched. The sacred tree lay on its side, its leaves wilting in the summer heat. Although Asgore insisted she rest, Undying also came to investigate the murders. She was the one to conclude that the humans had killed the guards. It was something else that had killed the humans. Something else that was now responsible for Dream's coma and Nightmare's disappearance. The Monster King shook his head, fearing the worst. But if the humans had killed Nightmare, surely Dream would have also turned to dust. Undying found trace amounts of monster dust around the tree stump, as well as Nightmare's clothes. It's not enough to be a whole body, unless they moved him somewhere. Undying shook her head, standing up from where she was crouched. Dream's body was spontaneously bleeding with different wounds before he flew away from us. He was certain Nightmare was being tortured. Asgore took a deep breath. Gods have mercy. Please help us find Nightmare soon. Captain! Captain, Your Highness! Called one of the guards in distress. You should see this! The fishwoman and goatman glanced at each other before heading towards the guard and the bodies where they laid. In seconds, Asgore recognized the severed head under the sheet, but more importantly, the crown on his head. Nero! Why is he here? Brows furrow, Undying knelt down to remove Nightmare's crown, a quiet fury brewing in her eyes. She held the crown a moment before looking up to her king. Handing it to him with both hands, she treated it as a precious relic, or as if it were Nightmare's body itself. Asgore's hand shook as he held the crown, hanging his head. Oh gods! Nightmare, what did they do to you? Meanwhile, at the palace, Dream and Nightmare's room was readily being converted into a hospital space. An ever-worried Toriel sat nearby as several healers came to look over Dream's condition. The healers attempted to come up with a consistent hypothesis on what had caused the Guardian's fallen state. The obvious conclusion would be the large chest wound, which managed to be properly mended with little trouble. But even then, the wounds had mended hours ago. Dream should have regained consciousness by now. It could be something psychological, something he experienced when he was in the grove, or maybe it was something to do with the felling of the tree, they eventually came to say. When Asgore stepped into the room, Toriel stood, her eyes begging to hear him say something good. But Asgore stared at his wife. With a shake of his head, he produced Nightmare's crown from his cloak. We haven't found him yet. She covered her mouth with one hand, reaching for the crown with the other, when Dream finally uttered a word. Nightmare, the Guardian wheezed. Dream, can you hear me? Said Toriel, rushing to his side. His sockets were open, but he had no eyelights, indicating an lucid state. Nightmare, where is he? Where's my brother? Asgore came to Dream's other side, opening his mouth to speak, but then stopped. Instead, he took Dream's hand, placing the moon of Nightmare's crown in his palm. Dream, do you know what happened? Did you see anything in the grove? The skeleton took a sharp breath, his hand tightening around Nightmare's crown. He killed them. He killed all of them. In the tree. He's killed us all. The king and queen were unsure what Dream's words meant as tears fell from his sockets. He threw himself into the white. He's gone. My brother is gone. As Dream grew more distressed, more painful breaths between his cries, Toriel knelt beside him, hushing him with gentle words, holding his other hand. She brought him back to rest. In the next few days, the monster royals would come to know what Dream's words truly meant. Reports started to flood in. Food in the fields began to rot, the blossoms of fruit trees refused to open. Monsters who had wished to have children suddenly found that their magic wasn't working. And as for the humans, worst of all, the wrath of that night came for them, as expecting parents were losing their pregnancies. Casilda and Chujin worked diligently to figure out what was happening, as something had gone wrong with the magic and the flow of life in the kingdom. No, not just the kingdom. Word spread that these plagues were affecting the entire world. It's because of the tree, I'm sure of it, said Chujin in a hushed voice. He stood with Casilda in Asgore's study as the king rubbed his face. I don't think any of us realized how truly important it was, said Casilda. The tree was what made all life possible. Without it, we're doomed to slowly die. Dream said, He's killed us all, said Asgore, standing up from his chair, folding his arms. He said it was Nightmare who felled the tree, not the humans. Has Lord Dream said anything else? Chujin asked. Has he been awake at all? Asgore shook his head. Toriel hasn't left his side. He's not awakened to eat or drink anything. The doctors have force-feeding him in order to keep him alive, but his health continues to slip away. He seems ready to. Unable to say the word, Asgore looked away. His royal mage and scientist hung their heads, unsure if anything could be done. What was left of the golden apples had been seized by the guards. Only the most trusted of Toriel's servants were set to prepare the apples for preservation and to keep them locked away. From that secure supply, Toriel had an elixir prepared for Dream's treatment. Each day she had to feed the unconscious skeleton. She also administered the elixir, praying it would eventually bring him back to her. 3 days passed, 4, 5, 6. A quiet doom settled over the land as food supplies began to dwindle. For the people of Edenfall, they knew what was happening. It was because the sacred tree had been cut down that life all around them began to entropy. But for those beyond the realm of monsters, they couldn't know or refused to believe that the felling of one tree was causing everything to die. What was to be done with it? In a desperate attempt, Casilda formed a plan to place the tree back on its stump. She summoned all the healers she could throughout the land. With their combined magic, they put all their might to attempt to heal the tree and set it back to its roots. But the attempt failed. For several long minutes they put their energies to it, but it refused to reattach. Still, they continued to try. They had no other choice. A rain began pouring over them, which eventually caused one of the poles holding the tree to slip. Monsters and humans rushed out of the way as the tree slammed against the ground, the trunk cracking in half. It was dead. There was no saving it. Casilda squinted her eyes against the storm before turning her gaze to the white sea. Is this what we deserve, Nightmare? That we should all die for your pain? For so long in darkness, Dream remained. There was something peaceful about it. No noise, no suffering, no pain. Though he felt disconnected from everything, at the same time, he was one with it all as well. They'd all slowly fade into darkness. Together, he wouldn't be alone, but he wouldn't see anyone either. Despite the peace, there was no rest here. No joy, no happiness. The lows were the price to pay for the highs. Was he ready for it to be over? Was this it? No. No, there were still many more highs and lows he had yet to experience. The sound of rain in the cackling fireplace came to Dream's ears. Opening his eyes, he stared longingly towards the ceiling in the silence. Though he had chosen to return to this mortal coil, he wasn't quite ready to move, until his aching bones and wings begged to be relieved of the compressed mattress. Carefully, he lifted himself up, pushing away the heavy blankets and looking about the reorganized room. Asgore and Toriel were asleep, laying against each other on the sofa next to the bed. They loved him so much, they were still here. Looking at his hands, bending his fingers, Dream still felt life in his bones. But something was missing. The bed next to him laid empty, except for a pile of towels that had been left by a servant. Nightmare's crown rested on the nightstand beside him. Gently, he took the crown into his hands, even as his bones were shaking. I'm not ready for this dream to end. The last piece of Nightmare he had left, Dream pressed the crown to his chest, holding back tears. There was something he needed to do. Getting to his feet, Dream quietly searched the wardrobe for a linen gown to dress himself. Looking at Toriel and Asgore, he couldn't help but feel how peaceful they looked in their sleep. He didn't want to disturb them. Taking the crown again, Dream went to the door, opening it slowly. There was a light rumble of thunder. The guards posted at the door were expecting one of the royals. However, their gaze shot down with surprise. Lord Dream, you're awake! Sir, where are you going? Ignoring them, Dream walked around and continued down the hall. His aim was for the entrance of the palace. Of course, the guards would wake Toriel and Asgore. He heard both of them shout his name as they came running, standing in front of him. Dream! Dream, you're awake! You shouldn't be out of bed! What's going on? Said Toriel, touching his shoulders and face. Please, I need to go to the grove. I need to go right away, Dream whispered, looking past them. Dream, in your condition, and this rain, said Asgore. Please, I need to go to him. I need to see him again. Dream, dear. Toriel shook her head. Nightmare isn't here. He disappeared into the everythingness, don't you remember? Still, Dream couldn't describe why he needed to go to the grove any more than why the birds knew they needed to migrate. Even though both goat monsters could overpower him if they chose, he pushed through. Respecting him enough, they let him pass, even if they didn't understand. Get the umbrellas, call a carriage, he heard Asgore say. Dream stepped down the palace steps and into the rain. He wouldn't wait for a carriage as his bare feet waded through the puddles between the cobblestones. As the servants awakened, the palace began to stir a light with lanterns through the darkness. Dream would pass through the gates, the royal guards looking on baffled as the king and queen followed behind him. One of the servants finally caught up, handing umbrellas to them. Lord Dream is awake. What's he doing? Where's he going? I think he's heading to the grove. What? Why there? I don't know. Let's see. Heading towards the falls, Dream walked steadily down the sidewalk. The crowd forming behind him chattered, but it was as if they knew something of reverence was taking place, keeping their voices low. Humans and monsters ran ahead of him, knocking on doors, awakening their neighbors as more lanterns pierced the darkness. Asgore came to hold his umbrella over Dream's head. The skeleton glanced up at the great goat monster, who gave a small nod. Dream smiled and continued his pace. The rainfall grew softer as Dream climbed the path to the grove. More and more of the city folk gathered behind them, ever curious to what was happening. Nightmare's crown felt cold in Dream's grip, but he held on to it as if it might attempt to slip away. Once they reached the grove and crossed the bridge, Dream stopped, staring at the stump in the tree, already beginning to rot. He turned just for a brief moment, holding up his hand for the people to stay back. A silence echoed through the crowd at his command. Stepping back into the rain, Dream drew in several deep, cold breaths. Approaching it, he reached down to touch the stump. The faintest golden light lit up between the tree and his fingertips. It was calling to him, yearning for him. The whole world, and something more, cried out to him for his mercy. Pulling his hand back, his head went quiet as he gripped Nightmare's crown. Behind him, he could hear the crowd shifting about, but instead of looking at them, he turned his gaze to the white sea. If Nightmare was dead, Dream would be dead too. That was a fact he was absolutely certain of. For him to still be alive, so too was his brother. Closing his eyes, Dream stood still, just feeling the rain hit the top of his skull and trail down his bones. The voices were still there in the everythingness, the realm of endless possibilities. Just because no one had returned from it didn't mean it was impossible. He thought about Nightmare, the carnage, the roots, the darkness covering his bones, how he screamed and writhed in pain. Dream thought about how the human mob had tortured him. He must have been so scared and so alone. This whole time he'd been waiting for Dream. Maybe he was afraid they'd kill him. Nightmare didn't fear death, this Dream knew. He feared never seeing his brother again. I will save you, if it takes the rest of my life. Dream spoke into the white. I vow it with all my soul. I will comfort you. I will rescue you from this evil that has taken you. But, opening his eyes, he stared for a moment more. In his mind, he hoped he might catch a glimpse of Nightmare somewhere out there. I have to save everyone else first. I know you waited for so long. I'm afraid you must wait even longer now. But I won't forget. I won't forget this promise. Nightmare, please wait for me. Turning back to the others, Dream found they'd spread out all round the grove, 100 or more pairs of eyes staring back at him, humans and monsters, some with umbrellas, sharing with their neighbors, others held lanterns so they might see him in the dark. Everyone stood silent, their gaze on him and what he was about to do. I'm going to sleep now, and I don't imagine I'll be awake for a very long time, he called out to his friends, his family, his community. Toriel's eyes grew wide. She glanced at Asgore touching his chest, as if he might have a clue to Dream's words. When the king appeared just as fearful as she, they both looked back to the guardian. With one last deep breath, Dream stepped up onto the stump. Where his feet touched the wood, it gave off a brilliant golden light. As he stood at its center, the whole stump filled with the light, magic flooding upward. It lifted his robes as if he were underwater, making his whole body feel weightless. All of a sudden, he felt his connection renewed to the earth and all living things once again. The magical energy filled the grove, causing the crowd to gasp as rain droplets stopped falling and started floating in place. From the sides of the stump, vines grew rapidly, crawling atop it, reaching for Dream's legs. Dream! Toriel cried as she ran to him, reaching out for him. The skeleton felt a rush of fear as well, reaching out to grab her hands as the vines took hold of his bones. He could feel the fibers of the tree reaching into his soul. How long will you be asleep? Tell me! Toriel cried, her cheeks wet with tears. I don't know. It's going to be so long that How long would it take? How long would the world and all the souls need from him? I have to regrow the tree. It's the only way to save you. Asgore was behind Toriel's well, taking his hands as the three of them held on. Dream, that could take centuries, said the king. Centuries. Then that meant... Looking past the goat monsters, he once again took in all those who had come to witness his slumber. He took a long moment to memorize as many faces as he could, a sad smile on his face. Yes, it will. Toriel? Dream locked eyes with the monster queen. You're the best mom I could have ever wished for. Tears fell from his own eyes, but these tears were magic, connecting him further to the flow of life and all its emotions. His right eye bled golden tears as his left eye bled violet. Asgore, thank you for being my dad. Still hanging from his hands was Nightmare's crown, which he shifted into their palms. If you see Nightmare again, tell him to... But it was too late. There were no more words. Dream's expression fell as his eyelids faded. The vines had grown up his body, connecting to every limb and every bone. So too did the golden light fade. The rain fell again as Dream's body went limp. Dream! Toriel cried as both the king and queen caught his body, gently lowering him onto the stump. Crouching there, both of them lost control of themselves, weeping. They held the body of their child, whom they'd never hear speak again. Unmoving, the crowd remained in quiet vigil, keeping watch over their king and queen. Over the next few days, a mournful relief came over Edenfall, as well as the rest of the world. Monsters were able to have children again, for which the humans hoped that meant they could do the same. The harvest had been ruined, which meant food would have to be rationed over the next year if they were to prevent mass unrest. Asgore would devise a plan with his advisors to make sure everyone had enough to eat until next year's harvest. With all that had happened, Toriel and Asgore were unsure what to do when it came to the grove. To let the city mourn? For the first week, they allowed people to visit Dream where he rested. All across the city, citizens brought flowers, letters, and small gifts to leave by the stump for their beloved guardian. After Casilda and Chujin examined Dream's condition, the tiny tree sprout above his head, they concluded that a new tree wouldn't be fully grown for 500 years. By that time, it was likely they would all have passed away. After the week was done, Asgore had the grove closed off to all visitors. Undying and her fellow guards were assigned to protect Dream and the grove for the indefinite future. The letters and gifts were gathered, for which Asgore had archived. With hope, Dream may one day get to read the words of the people he'd left behind. One evening, after the king left a meeting with several of the county lords, he requested tea and refreshments to be brought to the drawing room, where he intended to find Toriel and rest. Illuminated only by the fireplace, Asgore didn't notice at first the dark figure that sat in the chair by the hearth. His stride came to a halt when he saw the shadow, making out the form of a small humanoid figure. Its head laid back, but slowly rose. A violet eyelight appeared within the socket, glaring back at him. "Who are you?" Asgore said, his hand out, prepared to summon his trident. "You don't recognize me?" said Nightmare, his voice now twisted in a low reverb. "Nightmare! You're alive!" Asgore gasped, but his tone was confused between relief and fear. What happened to you?" he said, stepping closer. "Everything," Nightmare said, exasperated. Cautiously, Asgore approached, his eyes taking note of the blackness and the roots. Nightmare wore trousers, shoes, and a button-up shirt that were all a style unfamiliar to him, but also partook of the shade over his bones. He reached out, about to touch Nightmare, but withdrew his hand. "You're unwell. Stay here. I'll call a healer." As the king went to the door, Toriel entered. "Asgore, who is—" "It's Nightmare! Guards, bring the healer!" Asgore called out the door. "Nightmare?" Toriel gasped. Pushing past Asgore, she rushed to Nightmare, touching his face. For a moment she pulled back, looking at her hand. The darkness touched her fingertips, but quickly faded. "What is this? Oh God's Nightmare, what have they done to you?" Holding his face, her thumb rubbed at his cheekbone. For a split second, with each swipe, she was able to push the darkness away to see his bone. but the dark quickly covered the white. "I don't think it's coming off. I already tried," said Nightmare. "Nightmare, we're sorry, we're so sorry," she said, pulling him into a hug. As she held him, he put his arms around her carefully, leaning into the embrace. His bones were tense with repressed emotion. In seconds, Casilda was at the door, house robes thrown over her nightgown. She gave the quickest bow to Asgore before looking to Toriel and the figure hugging her. "It's Nightmare. Something is wrong with him. Can you see?" said Asgore. However, as the woman approached, Nightmare's glare pierced over Toriel's shoulder. Pushing Toriel away, Nightmare kicked the chair back as he stood with a roar. A pair of roots ripped out from his back, piercing Casilda through the chest and gut before throwing the old woman against the wall. Toriel let out a shrill scream. "No, Casilda!" The sudden bout of violence and the blood now sprayed across the drawing room floor caught the king off guard. Toriel rushed to where the red mage lay dead. "Keep those filthy animals away from me!" Nightmare hissed. Asgore summoned his trident, holding it to block the path between the corrupted skeleton and his wife, now desperately trying to help the fallen human. A pair of guards also rushed into the door. "Nightmare, what have you done? Casilda has been nothing but kind to you. She isn't responsible for your suffering," said Asgore. "They're all responsible. All of them have nothing but rotten souls." Nightmare's eyelight glowed brightly, his roots lifting him to match Asgore's height. "The only rotten one I see here is you," Asgore blurted out before realizing what he said. Nightmare's gaze fixed onto the king. His expression fell as the insult hit a sensitive chord. Glancing back at Toriel and where Casilda lay, he backed away, back onto his feet. Their confusion, their fear, their anger, it came swirling into Nightmare's skull like a sweet wine. Looking at his trembling hands, he started laughing. "You're right. I am rotten. I have become filthy. I have been made unclean. Only humans could have conceived to do this to me. If only they were gone. All of them were gone. Dream would still be awake." Asgore's expression hardened as he brought the trident into both of his hands. "That's not true. Dream told us before he went to sleep. You felled the tree, not the humans." "You're right. I did," Nightmare chuckled, covering his face with his hands, peeking through his fingers. "I wanted us all to die. If we were all dead, no one would have to suffer again." His laughing increased. His manic voice filled the room and the hall before he finally caught his breath. "I'm tired. There is no rest for me here," he said, continuing to back away until his legs passed into the shadow of the chair. There, his form sank into the darkness and completely disappeared. After a moment, Asgore stepped forward. "Nightmare! Nightmare!" Toriel looked back down at Casilda, but it was too late for the old woman. Her soul was already gone. The queen looked up as Asgore tossed aside furniture in the room and roared out for the corrupted guardian once again. But Nightmare did not return.